Welcome. It is Sunday, November 6th. It is a gross day in Poughkeepsie, but we are live with a 5-man pod today. It is the Relay Throw. I'm Dan Olivac. I'm here with Andrew Hard, my co-host. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a fun time because it's near the basketball seasons of Marist women's and men's basketball. Women opening up a Villanova tomorrow. We've been talking about that all year. Looking forward to Maddie Siegrist, Big East preseason player of the year, to come home. But I'm sure we'll talk more about that. For sure.
We got some recurring guests here with us. I think Christian and Jonathan might be tied for most appearances on the pod. So, I know they want to pass each other. I think Christian might have Jonathan by 1 or 2. I'm not
sure.
Because
Christian was on last time.
Right. Yeah. He loves us. So, but anyway, we got the men's basketball beat writer, Christian DeBlock, recurring guest. Christian, how you doing?
Good, man. It's like you said, not a great day weather-wise here, but hoops are coming around. That's all we could ask for. So, yeah, I'm ready to go.
For sure. And then we got, I don't even like talking about this guy. No, it's Jonathan. Wow. He is the women's basketball writer. He is the head editor of Center Field. Jonathan, how are you?
That's a loaded question, Dan, but since we only have a little bit of time, I'm fine. Time just keeps going by, and kind of like Christian said, we're up on basketball season, the best time of the year. I think basketball is king here at Marist. So I feel like there's a lot of excitement. A lot of question marks around both teams. A lot of unknown entities. New faces, stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how stuff plays out. You got women opening up with Villanova, which will be an interesting game. They have another home game. Men have 2 home games this week, so it'll be interesting to get our first impressions of both teams.
For sure. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we have a Mansfield star wide receiver, second all PSAC East honors for his time at Mansfield. He is, since 2004, an ESPN Radio host. He is the current host of Freddie and Fitzsimmons of ESPN Radio on the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80, TuneIn, and your smart speaker.
Attaboy.
And he is my professor this semester. Freddie Coleman on the pod. We got him on the pod. How are you doing?
I'm good, boys. How's everybody doing today on this Sunday? And by the way, how can you say something weather-wise is gross and icky when it's 70 degrees on the first weekend in November?
That's what I'm saying.
Muggy. Freddie, it's supposed to be fall. It's football time. It's got to be a little cold sweater weather.
It's still football time, just that you have a little bit of Native American summer that happens since Thursday and Friday. Enjoy it, because this way, when it's 5 degrees and you walk into class, I don't want to hear your sob stories about how cold it is outside.
Freddie, we're all Northeast guys. We like the cold weather. We want it.
I'm a Northeast guy too, but when you get 75-degree weather in the Northeast and it doesn't happen every 25, 30 years or so, you enjoy it, because in another week or two, it's going to be back down to 50, 55 degrees.
See, that's true, but I kind of like that for this time of year. I gotta be playing football. I gotta be in this cold weather. I don't know.
Listen,
it's muggy. I wouldn't
anytime
complain.
you can be wearing shorts in November, you take it.
Exactly. Short sleeves.
It's not.
I guess I'm outnumbered.
I remember when
you should know this.
When I was younger, my friends and I would always have these stupid competitions. Who could wear shorts in the coldest weather. And one time we got 6 inches of snow one night. They still had school because, that's how it is up in the Northeast. And, my friend came to school with shorts on. It was 15 degrees. And I was like, okay, that's enough of that. That was all for me. But
the Vigiano look.
Yeah, you just exactly. The guy always wears shorts. So he's probably happy today.
All right. Well, we're all 50-50 on this weather, but we're going to get right into our program today. This is going to be a fun one, probably a relay throw for the ages. We're going to start off just, Freddie, you're the man on the pod today. So we're going to, we've already talked to Christian and Jonathan so many times. We're going to, kick it right off with you and then talk about some Marist hoops, because it is basketball week. We are all pumped. You know, big matchup with Villanova to start off, and then see what the men's program does with their completely new roster. But let's start off. Freddie, you have history with Marist, and I think you gotta kind of give us an idea, because there's not a lot out there on the internet as far as, you know, obviously we've talked prior to this, you know, you were a color guy at Marist for 3 years, and just give us a good idea about your connections with Marist.
Well, I've always loved my connection with Marist athletics, and it doesn't matter what the sport has been. Anytime I've had a chance to be a part of the Marist community, especially from the athletic standpoint, it was always cool. And I'll never get the first time I had a chance to be a part of that was back when Media One, before they became Cablevision, they were carrying Marist basketball in the Hudson Valley. And there was one game where Joe Beckerly, who now produces Army football and Army sports, he was the color analyst and Dean Darling was the play-by-play voice. And Joe Beckerly had a commitment, and they had me fill in for one game when Marist had a chance to play against St. Peter's. And I've known Dean Darling for the longest time. We both worked Army football together. And so to have a chance to do something like that, I always would go to Marist games anyway. So I'm working at WPDH at that time, involved in the classic rock and roll area. So having a chance to do that game, not thinking anything was going to come of it. And the next day, I got a call from Mike McCarthy, and he said, we have a part-time position to do sports on the weekend if you want to do that, and maybe be some more Marist basketball involved in that. And that became really that kind of association where I swear I spent more time at Marist covering sports than I ever spent in my own apartment living in Highland, New York. So it's always good to have that connection going that far back and having a chance to revisit it once again.
Marist is kind of like Syracuse for grads in terms of sports announcing. Like you have Mike Breen, who came through here. Is it Sam who wrote that story? Sam Giovanni?
Yes.
Good story about Mike Breen and Freddie. So there's, you know, a lot of people come through. It's a good stomping ground.
Yeah, I call Marist College the Hudson Valley Mafia, because so many people have been able to leave from like the Marist College area, whether they covered sports or graduated from the school. I mean, you mentioned Mike Breen. Jay Reynolds, the same thing. He's a graduate of Marist College. J.W. Stewart, who worked at ESPN for more than a little bit, he's a graduate of Marist College. He had my association with them. Kyle Doty, who also worked with me on Sports Scene and Cablevision, and now he's one of the higher ups in terms of the integration department at ESPN. So there are a lot of people that have been able to come out of the Hudson Valley radio and quote-unquote TV market. Brian Kenny, another one, where he did Marist basketball with Dean Darling for a long, long time. So there are plenty of members of the Hudson Valley Mafia that have been able to trampoline from being around Marist College and Army and Vassar, et cetera, and leave that area and go on to do really, really great things on a national stage.
I like that, Hudson Valley Mafia. That might be the title of this episode. Because I mean, let's face it, we are the Hudson Valley Mafia. You know, you were there for a good amount of time, 2 or 3 years. You know, that's a significant amount of time doing color. And you must have some great memories from your time doing that. Obviously, this is like not everyone gets to do color for a college basketball team. I'm sure you got some great experience and some great memories, but does anything stick out to you? You know, one memory or one game that comes to mind when you think of your time at covering Marist?
Oh, the Miracle at McCann back in the year 2000, because Marist had been in the MAC. It was their third year in the MAC, and they were really starting to build and get the kind of players you need to succeed in that league. And the one thing that will always stand out about that memory was a couple of things. Number one, they were playing Siena, so it's always a rivalry involving both of those teams. Number two is the last day of the regular season, and up to that point, Marist had been playing really, really well. But you knew Siena was going to be the top seed in the MAC conference. But those two teams, anytime they got together, it was always entertaining basketball. And that game just went back and forth the whole time until Sean Kennedy hit that jumper from 40 feet away at the buzzer. He was like the De'Aaron Fox, what we saw last night from De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento beating Orlando.
Oh, my God.
He did the same thing at the buzzer. I mean, leaning to the left with the right hand, nothing but net. That's still a memory that's going to be burned in my mind, because so many great things have happened. I've had a chance to be a part of with Marist basketball, whether it's been the women or the men, or when the football team started to get together a little bit. Marist baseball, and they had that great run in the early 2000s when John Sheff was the head coach and they would go to the NCAA tournament. But just seeing how it really validated what Dave McGarrett and his staff were doing at the time, getting the right kind of players to compete at that level. And it really set the stage where the next year they got to the semifinals of the MAC tournament. And then the year after that, they were the conference champions in the regular season. That kind of set the stage that game where they beat Siena that way back in the year 2000.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I mean, I'm not even gonna lie, I haven't heard of the Miracle in McCann. I'm sure these guys have, but so I guess we have a rival. Is Siena our rival in hoops? Maybe a longtime rival. We've been trying to do a story on MAC rivals for Marist. So you know,
Siena's the one. Siena, because they're the closest in proximity. Oh, absolutely. Because anytime those teams would get together in basketball, it was always heated competition. Even before Marist got into the MAC, they would play each other every year, and it's always that neighborhood battle, as I like to call it. And everybody thought Marist and Iona were rivals. Well, Iona's rivals more Manhattan. Those two schools can't stand each other. Comes to that. But Marist and Siena, they kind of been frenemies, but there's been a lot of association with both of them. But anytime when both teams are really, really good, and whether you're playing up in Albany at Siena's big time arena down at McCann, anytime those two are really going to get together, those games are always, always fascinating to watch.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Andrew, I know you got some burning questions to ask.
No. It's just you mentioned the frenemy thing, and that's very interesting to me because like there is a lot of connection between Siena and Marist in terms of like employees, even like some of my bosses at the business office are Siena grads. But, like have their children come through Marist, and so there's a lot of connection there. You're totally spot on about that.
Yeah, a lot of Marist grads work up in the Capital District in different kind of fields, whether it's entertainment, whether it's business, whether it's finance. And I usually run into a couple of them because Albany's a great place. It's a great place to live, underrated sports market, terrific people in the Capital District. So it's really cool how they kind of have that New York Thruway connection involving both of those schools. And like I said, when they were good, they would really push each other, and they always kept an eye on each other to see what they were doing. And anytime they played each other, those games usually either on the weekend or close to the weekend where you could circle those games and have a lot of attendance in place. It was always fascinating how those games would really turn out, where one team would have an advantage but not win, or another team would have the advantage and they would have to hang on to win. It was always really cool when Marist first got into the MAC, how that rivalry really intensified between both of those schools.
Yeah, it's good to know. I've always wondered, if there's a real rival, and I guess it goes back a few decades. And now a side note, I was thinking about this. I'm in your class right now. Jonathan, were you in his class? Yeah. And Andrew, you were too. Oh, wow. No, you missed out, man. I kind of feel like this is a test because this is kind of some of the skills we've been working on in your class. But, you've come from a color analyst to a teacher here at Marist, a professor and adjunct, and your class, first off, I'm going to plug it just because it's great.
Thank you.
And you got some great teaching skills, and, I've learned so much from that class. But was it, in your radar, like back then, that you thought like, hey, I want to teach someday. I want to teach people some of the skills I learned. Like what does teaching mean to you?
It means so much because I always preach to everybody, if you give a chance or get a chance to give back, you should do that. And I'd always thought about it for the longest time, but I didn't know how either to go about it or if I really wanted to do it. If I'm going to sink my teeth into something like that, I want to make sure it's not a part-time thing. I wanted to make sure it's going to be a full-time thing because I didn't want to cheat the young men and young women that were going to be a part of that class. So I guess for the longest time, I really resisted it because I wanted to make sure if I was going to commit, I was going to commit fully. And when I got the call from Jane McManus, who was running the sports comm department at Marist, she thought what I would be able to have would be something that could benefit people. And I said, well, I've never done this before, and I don't know if I'm gonna need any textbooks or anything. She goes, no, what you've done, what you've been able to do, the experiences that you've been able to be a part of. That's what our young people need to hear. They need to hear the highs. They need to hear the lows. They need to know exactly what's going on and hear the truth about it. And believe me, I had a lot of misgivings doing it last semester before I'd said, what have I got to lose? Let's see if I'm able to be good at this. If I'm good at this, then maybe people can benefit. And I was able to really have a chance to understand and learn as much from you guys, as much as you guys were learning from me. That was the one thing that I really, really wanted to make sure that we were all together on the same page to make that work. And if I'm not doing something correctly, I'd want people to hold me accountable. I'm not talking about people above my pay grade. I'm talking about the students that I taught every other day, Tuesdays and Thursdays in class. That was something that I really wanted to have happen. And that's exactly what's been able to happen. So even though I won't be doing it for a while because I'm going to go after my master's and go after it from that standpoint, so I can really, really maybe think about doing that more whenever I retire from ESPN Radio. But it has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. It's been a great challenge, and I'm glad that hopefully I was able to meet that challenge.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly, and the connection you got with us, it really puts us in a professional level. It feels like a professional setting, even though it's very laid back. We always have fun in that class.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what makes Freddie Coleman Freddie Cole him, as I say pretty often. But now you're going to seek your master's, and that's a big step, and I'm sure that took a lot of thinking. Obviously, that's something us four think about after our time at Marist, and you're kind of coming back to that classroom setting now as a student. What went into that decision?
I'd always thought about getting my master's before, and it was something that my mom and I had talked about for the longest time, that even when I graduated from Mansfield back in 1987, long before you dudes were born, that was something that we had talked about, that maybe adding to my education. And she said, even if you don't use it for something, at least you have it, because she always believes that an educated person should be a learned person, and you should always keep learning no matter what that is. So it was something that had always been bubbling under, and it really came to the surface in about the last 3 to 4 years that I seriously want to think about doing that. And by being in that classroom setting, not only this semester, but last semester, it really kind of intensified that in my mind to say, that is something that kind of stimuli is really going to benefit me if I have a chance. And if I'm going to go for it, then really put myself in a position to do something like that. So that decision had been there. It had been dormant for more than a minute. But the minute that it started to become more and more plausible, and there was enough evidence where I could make that work and not have to have that coexist with what I'm doing professionally when it comes to my job at ESPN Radio, then that I knew that was something I was definitely going to pursue and put that more in earnest.
Yeah, I mean, that sums it up perfectly. And I think we've gotten the whole scope of your connection at Marist, and now you're going from student to analyst to professor to back to student, and that's pretty crazy cycle. You got more experience than all four of us combined. But I think you guys want to transition into some Marist hoops. I mean,
let's do this.
It's hoops week, and who better to talk to that about than Christian the Block, Jonathan Kinane, and Freddie Coleman. Man, we got a lot of news coming up. I'm excited for this week. I know I'm going to be at that game Monday. Doing some reporting of my own, along with Jonathan, who's going to be there. But Jonathan, it's this Villanova game. It's right around the corner. What are we looking for in this matchup, and for Marist women's hoops in general? What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question, and may I say I love that little graphic that's rolling along the screen right now.
Yeah.
Shout out Andrew.
This is an interesting game because you got Marist, who was picked to finish in a tie for sixth in the MAC. Obviously, not a good season last year. One kind of want to forget about. And some departures, some new faces in for this year. And Villanova, that's certainly an interesting opening game. And I'm really not sure how much we're going to learn about the team here. I'm going to wait until they take on they pick on people their own size, because Villanova's picked to finish third in the Big East this season.
That's wild.
And remember who else plays in the Big East? UConn. And they actually got one first place vote. So someone thinks they're going to finish first out of all the
over
Big
UConn.
East. What's that?
Over UConn? Yeah,
someone picked them over UConn. So and they beat UConn last year. And a big part of that was Maddie Segrist, who hails from Our Lady of Lourdes High School right here in beautiful Poughkeepsie, New York. So, I mean, that's a ready-made storyline coming into this game. There's going to be a lot of people wearing blue in McCann tomorrow. And honestly, if Marist can keep it anywhere close, I think you have to be encouraged. Like, I hate to use the term moral victory, but you're playing against teams bigger than you, more talented than you. The only advantage really is that you get the game at home. So we'll see if that does anything. But then, looking at their schedule, they've got a lot of good mid-major teams on that schedule. And, you look at, they play Penn and Green Bay right after. Those are two pretty good teams. Yeah. So, we'll learn from, and then they have the games in Ireland. But we'll learn more from those games to really judge what this Marist team is. And there are some exciting additions they have. Like, you guys want me to get into this now, or
get into it?
Absolutely.
Makeup.
Give us all a good idea.
So, a couple, the first thing I want to mention is they went into the portal and they got Maeve Donnelly, who's a 6'5" center. They got her from Hawaii, of all places. But the crazier thing is that she's from Vestal, New York, which is in the Binghamton area. And, Marist already has two players from the Binghamton area, and Kiara Fisher and Zaria Shazer. So, they played AAU ball together. So a lot of interesting connections there. You consider how bad Marist was on the board. I mean, they're awful on offense, but they're also struggling on the boards. I mean, I think they were last in the MAC in rebounding margin. They got out-rebounded by over 8 boards a game. So she should help right away. And I don't know if Georgia's plans to start her or start Sam Bailey at center. Bailey got most of the starting time last year, but Marist also lacked that kind of inside presence, as Bailey's more of like a stretch 4, stretch 5 kind of player. And then the other person I'm really excited about is Jackie Pittick, a freshman from my neck of the woods, up in Adams, New York. She played in Section 3, one of the most competitive sections in New York, if you know anything about high school hoops here. And she broke the all-time scoring record in Section 3 that was held by Brianna Stewart. So anytime you're in company with Brianna Stewart, you'll take that. You'll take that. And I think it was really kind of a coup that Marist was able to go pick her up. But she's also a point guard, so we'll see how her and Fisher kind of interact. George just mentioned they might play together at times. It seems like, Pittick's more of that true point guard. She wants to get in there and distribute. And it's interesting. They're gonna have a lot more options than they did last year with all their injury troubles and in-depth troubles and stuff like that. But that is my first long-winded tangent about women's basketball, and it probably won't be my last today.
Now you talk about that too, and of course, I mean, we're going to get into transfers later, probably more in depth. The women's team didn't lose as much as the men's team, but they still lost some key pieces. How do you think that affects this team's makeup?
Yeah, well, I mean, they lost 4 players who played, good deal of minutes. I mean, Trey Kennedy, they're the first person into, first person you think of. And I mean, Kennedy just wasn't the same player as, back in, when they went to the tournament a few years ago. Suffered a knee injury, kept them out for a while, and just struggled from the field. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt over at George Mason. Annabelle Ellison, she transferred to Stetson, closer to home for her. And for her, I think it was just like a minutes thing, like this year back with everyone healthy and, someone like Pittick coming in, it's just where was she going to fit in? And the same for the other 2 transfers, Siobhan Boylan and Emma Wax, who are both playing at the D2 level right now. But I really don't Kennedy hurts. And from what I know, Kennedy's transfer wasn't really a basketball thing. The others, it was more of a basketball thing. But something Georges pointed out both at the last press conference he did in Atlantic City when they lost after scoring 29 points against St. Peter's. And I talked to him last week. He thinks the culture around this team's better, the culture, the chemistry. Last year he mentioned that, there was too much I. It was too much about I, not enough about we, and we sound like Little Piggy or something. But it seems even with, the influx of new faces, it seems like this team's gelling a little better. And I do expect them to kind of look more like the Marist women's teams we're used to seeing.
Sometimes addition by subtraction can actually help because Tree Kennedy was their star and everybody knew it, but Fisher was able to step up and play well. and as well as Frazier. So you had Shazer, stepping up. Well, you have to wonder how much of that maybe played in a psyche that I'm supposed to be the star of this team, but two other players are playing better than I was. I wonder how much of that factored into a decision to move on from Marist.
Yeah, and when Fisher went out in the middle of January with like a shoulder injury, I believe it was, and after that happened, everything kind of went even more downhill for them. Kennedy felt more pressure, you could just zero in on Kennedy more because she was the main option, and Shazer's play took a dip because her and Fisher kind of had that chemistry. And from playing AAU together and just knowing each other's games, and that kind of hurt. But yeah, I think that this team is in a much better place than they were at the end of last season.
That's really good, and I think obviously with Georges leaving, and we got a new coach coming up, and for this program for the future, and not this you got to think about the season, but the culture is so important, and I'm sure. We can talk about the men's basketball team and their current culture, and Christian will be happy to talk to us about that. But, I feel it does feel good that we have the women's basketball team back in a good spot, a spot that they've been in.
Yeah. And they should be in a position of strength going forward because, the new coach you mentioned is Aaron Dowdy, who is Georges's, basically Georges's right-hand person, And this transition is something that's been in the works for a while. I mean, Georges tells me, he won the MAC Coach of the Year award a couple years ago. That award is in Dowdy's office because she did a lot of that was the COVID year when they won and went to the NCAA tournament. Dowdy was the one doing a lot of the on-court coaching. Like you can go back and watch old games and you'll see she's up. Well, Georges is, coaching from the bench. She's up doing a lot of the in-game coaching stuff. So it's not like you're missing a beat here. And, Dowdy came through the program. She's been an assistant pretty much ever since she graduated. And, I think they're in a real position of strength.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think a lot of people think about the coaching, but a lot of which you mentioned, the recruiting process is also something you have to learn, which is just a whole nother ball game. And how much do you have an idea of how much she's played into that recruiting process already?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Georges isn't really doing any recruiting. It's all her. And, she knows what she's doing. I've seen stuff on Twitter, like they're out offering people. I think they might have picked up a commitment not too long ago, but it's pretty much all her. Georges is pretty much all he's doing now is just watching film of the teams they're playing and just preparing for that. Well, leave it to Dowdy and the rest of the coaching staff to recruit.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty perfectly. I think that's a good preview into what this women's team can do. Now we got to get into this men's team, and
do we?
It's just I don't.
Yes, we do.
Unfortunately,
like it or not, Andrew. Yes, we do.
Yeah, and I think I got some questions for Freddie about the portal. Eventually, we'll get into that. But Christian, I think we got to start with you, man.
Yeah.
You has been the closest person to this team the past year, and had some great articles with this drama, and just in general, it's been a wacky year and a half. But what's going through your head? What's in the block mind right now?
Yeah, I think it's a lot different compared to the women's side. You have a team that lost so many players. I mean, 7 players went to the transfer portal. All of them were in the rotation, and then you take into account Jordan Jones is gone too. So it's really 8 guys. There's a lot of question marks going into this season for the men's basketball team. A lot of freshmen, a lot of transfers. The best player coming back is Noah Harris, and we're going to have to see how he steps into a more defined role. So there's a lot of questions with this team. And, for a men's side of the conference that lost a lot of players, I mean, they're not the only team. I mean, St. Peter's lost so many players. There's a lot of other schools as well that, the transfer portal just does what it does with the MAC. So, it's going to be an interesting season for the MAC as a whole, but especially for Marist.
Yeah, that transfer portal, just for the MAC in general, it's really, it's making this division weak, this conference weak, and it hurts to see when you got a team like St. Peter's going on their miracle run. And Freddie, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts. Marist, we had, with Jao Atuka leaving, that was huge. And first off, he shouldn't have been playing in this conference. That is a talent that is going to shine in the ACC and for Wake Forest. Hopefully, I think he might get some starting reps. And even some of these other players are they're set. They've completely separated themselves from the program, but it goes for other schools too. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on specifically what the transfer portal has done to the MAC in general.
Well, it's done the mid-major conferences, period, because the Northeast Conference, a lot of schools have gone through that too. For example, the team that I cover and I do games for, Sacred Heart NEC Front Row, they lost their starting backcourt. Two guys are all conference players, and Aaron Clark, who's now at Stony Brook, and you got Thomas, who's now playing in Hofstra. So those are two big-time guys. And college basketball, especially mid-majors, you got to have great guard play, because if you don't, you're going to suffer. The one thing I will say about the transfer portal, and I've always believed that players should have the right to jump around the same way that coaches are able to do the same thing. The difference is you got to regulate that a little bit better. But also, here's how you can regulate it. And I go to something that Kirby Smart of Georgia said yesterday after his team beat Tennessee. He said, yeah, I know the transfer portal is out there, but if you have the right kind of culture, then players don't want to leave. And more than ever before, it just can't be about recruiting players to replace players. It's got to be about recruiting people that are going to buy in with what you're going to buy in. And I'm not saying that Jao Atuka didn't want to buy in with Coach Dunn. Whatever reason he decided to leave, you get a chance to play in the ACC. I'm not going to deny any young man or young woman that opportunity that you can go to a level above and make that work for you, especially if you believe you want to play in the NBA or the WNBA. I think they should have the opportunity to do that. But I've seen so many mid-major guards go to other mid-major schools. I'm thinking, why would you make a lateral move like that, especially if a coach did not leave? So whatever culture you're trying to build, it's not about recruiting players to make sure you can have talented players, but you got to recruit people, and you got to re-recruit those people, because you just never know who's in some kid's ear. It could be a parent, could be AAU coach, could be a friend, it could be anybody. Say, man, you can go to a better level and play. More often than not, they're getting the wrong kind of information, because I guarantee you, for every one person that goes in transfer portal and succeeds, there are hundreds of players that are saying to themselves, why did I leave in the first place? I should have stayed right where I am. But it's going to be hard for them to go back to those programs, because I know if I'm a coach and you decide to take off from me, I'm not going to say you shouldn't do that, but I'm not going to just welcome you back with open arms. I don't care how talented you are. So it's got to be more about recruiting the right kind of people to buy in more than ever before, because Georgia didn't lose one player to the transfer portal, the University of Georgia football team. That's almost impossible to do in this day and age. They'd have to go into the transfer portal to get people, and they didn't lose anybody to the transfer portal, because the culture that they built at the University of Georgia, these players would say, even if I got to wait a year or two, I'd rather wait here than go somewhere else and play and not be in the same great position I am right now.
Yeah, that speaks volumes, especially for a football program. I mean, when you got guys waiting for get their chance 2 years down the line, I mean, that speaks volumes. And this mid-major level, like you mentioned, it's all about culture. And
yeah,
Christian, I mean, you can attest me to this, but I guess Dunn is trying to make a new culture here. He's recruited probably 7 or 8 new. I don't know how many new guys are even on this roster.
It's 4 freshmen, and it might be 4 transfers in.
Yeah,
which is
7 or 8.
An overhaul.
It's an overhaul for sure. And I was part of the men's roundtable that we did, along with Brian Ramos and
Matt
Spirio. Shout out Spirio. But Andrew and I have looked at these transfers since spring, and I think we had a whole pod when there was only 3.
We had an emergency podcast episode.
I like that was a fun one. That's when that's when everyone was leaving, and I texted Andrew the night before. I was like, "What is happening?" I didn't know that was going to be a thing.
It was just us venting.
We really were. It was just us panicking on a podcast, and then we were like, "Hey, we got 3 new recruits," and then now we got 8 new guys on this team, and it's wild. But Christian, give us. I mean, I know who I'm going to talk about. Matt McCool. Shout out Amherst, New Hampshire. I gotta meet this guy. Freddie, that's 10 minutes away from my my hometown of Brookline, New Hampshire. It's a small world.
Right.
But this is he's a 6'9",
6'8"
6 foot.
He's listed at 6'9". He's actually 6'11". I talked to him last
Really?
Thursday. Great guy.
Yeah.
You definitely should meet him, Dan.
And he's a 4. He's not a center. He's a 4. So it's like I've actually talked to some guys on my old high school basketball team. Apparently, he was just a unicorn, just dominant in New Hampshire basketball. So, but Christian, give us a great idea into this, these new guys, this new culture that Dunn is trying to form.
Yeah, so I talked to him late last week. So I know a couple of the freshmen that are going to get opportunities from what he's saying so far. So Isaiah Brickner, 6'4" guard/forward. He's from San Diego. He's the most notable freshman that is probably going to get some length to begin the season. And then Jaden Daughtry as well, 6'6" forward from New York. He went to St. Francis Prep, so he's right around. Those are the two that are probably going to get the most opportunities from the freshman perspective. The person I'm most interested about from the transfers is Patrick Gardner. He's a 6'11" center, but he can stretch the floor. He's a guy that's, I think he shot over 33% from the three at St. Michael's College last year, which is the D2 level. But if they have a guy who can stretch the floor at that size, it changes the whole game for how teams have to defend Marist because, I mean, since we've been here, Marist has not had a big that can stretch past, 18 feet with Jordan Jones, Victor Eno. So if he can play well at this level, going from D2 to T1, I think it's a really interesting thing to watch because, having a guy at 6'11" that can hit threes is not common at this mid-major level, I would say. Well,
Also for Marist, they haven't had that tall of a player in a while. I mean, Jordan Jones was 6'8", Eno's 6'9". You have two guys already who, I mean, if we believe the McCool story that he's 6'11", I mean, 6'10" and 6'11", I mean, that makes a big deal for Marist in terms of rebounding some size.
Yeah, and also, Dan, I wanted to mention, I think the biggest thing for this team this season is finding a leader amongst this group. I mean, losing Matt Harasmi, not only for what he did on the floor, but what he was doing off the floor is critical. I mean, he was the leader. He's been there the whole time. He was the first guy that Coach Dunn recruited. They need to find somebody, whether it's one of the freshmen, one of the transfers, somebody has to step into that role as the vocal leader because, we talk about chemistry and connection and all these different things. That's the thing they're going to miss from the group they got. They had last year. I mean, obviously the talent they got rid of in terms of Jao Tuca, Ricardo Wright, the list goes on. But Matt Harasmi's leadership is maybe the biggest thing they lost because he had been there from day one, and they really will miss him off the floor, especially.
And I think that's why the graduate students are there because they've been through those different kind of situations. And when you have upperclassmen that have been at a different program, you're hoping that whatever leadership that you're lacking with Harasmi not being there, that they'll be able to provide because you can't expect freshmen and sophomores to do that, especially when they're trying to figure out college life more than anything else. And they're trying to make sure their heads aren't spinning around. You're hoping that the upperclassmen, specifically the graduate students that you have or that you brought in, are going to be able to fill that leadership void that you weren't counting on with Harasmi no longer being part of the program.
Yeah, that's a great point, Freddie. And I'm really glad, Christian, you mentioned Harasmi because, a bench play, he was kind of in and out of the bench, but really just a great leadership for that team. And he's now UNH Wildcat. So shout out New Hampshire, the Max on the map, but so is New Hampshire. So, but anyway, he really was a leadership and a leadership head. And I wasn't even interviewing that team. But you could just tell that everyone revolved around him. He was really that a voice they listened to. And I think it's a testament that with Dunn's first recruit now gone and willingly choosing to leave, not staying, this is a new wake, and we have to be ready for anything that happens this year. And you look at that roundtable. I mean, I had them only at 7 wins, but I think Ramos had them at around 9 or 10. But they really could be anywhere this year in that middle to bottom half of the standings, maybe even high. It's just like this whole conference is turned upside down. And it's really wild. So,
and Christian mentioned the freshmen earlier. If they have a great freshman class this year, it could all turn around pretty fast. You know, you saw the importance of what Jawa Tuca did last year on the Marist team. He pretty much carried them to, the 6th seed in the MAC. And, if you have a great freshman class again, I mean, you mentioned 2 freshmen in Brickner and Daughtry who are going to get significant playing time if we're believing Dunn here. If they, make a big impact, that's all you need this year. So let's see what happens.
The thing now in the year of our Lord 2022 in the college basketball environment,
year of our Lord.
You don't know if you want to have having great freshmen is good, but look at Atuka. If you have a great freshman, off to the ACC, off to the Big East, off to wherever. So it's kind of like I feel like it's kind of, you either want to win now or you want to slowly have that freshman class build, because if one of them breaks out and puts up something similar to what Atuka did last year, it's, I don't know the incoming class very well, so I couldn't tell you who has potential and who doesn't. But it's almost like it's a double-edged sword. Like if they get good too good too fast,
time bomb.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm a big believer. Worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes. If you're mid-major school, whether you're Marist, I don't care what mid-major conference you play in. If someone's going to leave, you can't prevent them from leaving. If they're going to go, they're just going to go. But that shouldn't decide how you're going to coach your team to be prepared to win basketball games or to compete at any kind of level to win basketball games. How many coaches probably thought about, well, I'll think about that later. More than ever before, you got to deal with the right here and the right now. And then you got to coach those players. And then in the off season, if you have to go out and re-recruit again, maybe that's the new world in our year with our Lord 2022 that coaches are going to have to deal with, whether they like it or not. And if you don't want to deal with it, then you're not going to be successful anywhere much longer, especially more than ever before, where those kind of pieces are going to be part of what you're trying to do, building a basketball program, but keeping that culture going.
Yeah. And one of the things we talked about it a little bit earlier, but you got these freshmen, these grad transfers, and then you have the returners. So between the returners and the grad transfers, when it comes to leadership, who defers to who? Because, with we have Javon Cooley and Tyler St. Fursey, who are the two, I guess, oldest players, longest tenured players on the team, but they don't exactly get very many minutes.
Right.
You got Noah Harris, who played a bench role, pretty much a bench role last year. And is he the vocal leader as a sophomore? Or, it's just a really interesting dynamic. Do these grad transfers come in and say, I'm the new sheriff in town or whatever? It's interesting. It's just a really interesting dynamic. And I guess we'll see how it plays out on Wednesday night.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say that if you're a coach with that situation, Jonathan, it's a fair point to raise. You let your players know the best players are going to play. It's not about anything else. Whoever's out there, whoever is kicking somebody's behind in practice, whoever's producing, that's how you figure that out, because the best players are going to be out there, and then their voices are going to be there to be that leadership role, because you have to rely on them and you have to count on them to win games. So no matter what's going on with who's here, who was here, who's coming in, that's the message that if I'm John Dunn, I'm saying, guys, I know this is a mismatch that we're together, but we're still Marist basketball. And the best players I'm going to put out there are going to play. How you handle that deal is going to be on you. If you don't believe you're playing enough, then prove it to me in practice why I should play you more. But to me, that's how you solve that problem. Whoever's producing the best, those are the guys going to be out there more than anybody else.
Yeah, and that's what's going to form that culture that has been missing. And, they kind of got lost last year after that playoff loss, and then into the transfer portal, and then into this new roster. The talent is really what's going to bring forth a new level or a new wave of Marist basketball. Now, Christian, you mentioned we had this section in the roundtable, and Jonathan mentioned Noah Harris, might be probably in a starting role this year, just because of his reps last year. And you've talked to Dunn, but he is confident with the 3-ball. He is, a true, not really a point guard, more of a shooting guard, and just kind of like a scorer. He likes to shoot. Is he going to be a leader for this team? Did Dunn give you a good idea of if there's any voice in this roster so far, or is it more what Freddie and Jonathan said? You got to this is going to take a little bit to figure out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more what Freddie and Jonathan just mentioned. From what I talked to Coach Dunn in terms of No Harris, he told me this summer he got, he put more weight on, so he's going to be a bit stronger. I don't know if I see him being that vocal leader. I think it might end up being, one of those grad transfers just because of their experience. Because, No Harris he had a couple outbursts last year. I think he had like season high 20-something against Quinnipiac on the road. So he's a good scorer. Like he can score the ball. And I think for me, at least, if we want to just touch on him quickly, his biggest thing for me is to watch how he develops defensively. 6'1", he's more of a 2 guard really, but size of a 1. If he steps it up defensively, I think he's a guy that could represent the Marist team in an all season, not maybe the first team, but maybe second or third team down the year if he has a good year. I think he's, a really talented player. He's just going to have to, find himself in a more defined role because, like Jonathan mentioned, he was playing, 18 to 20 minutes a night off the bench. I think he got 4 starts. So I'm interested to see how he develops into, a guy who's going to have to start and play 25 to 28 minutes instead of, getting a handful of minutes off the bench.
It's definitely a lot. It has to do with how he's feeling on that 3 ball because the nights he was hot. Like you said, he had a season high in the mid-20s, and that was I think a home game, and he was shining. He looked like he could shoot from anywhere that night. But he took I think he made the second most threes on the roster. Or at least he took the second most threes. Shot a little over 30%, and you hope he kind of meshes into knowing what he wants to do. But that defense is important, especially for his size. Yeah. And hey, maybe with a bit of that strength, maybe he'll attack the board. Maybe he'll sneak into the boards. Hopefully attack the basket more. Be aggressive. Keep being an aggressive shooter. So you hope he meshes into that scoring role.
Well, for me with Noah, it's yes, be aggressive, but pick the right shots. Like he was a 30% 3-point shooter because of his volume. He shot a lot of threes. I don't remember many times him driving to the rim, and maybe having more strength will help him with that. Especially with Zhao being gone, that was Zhao's role. Noah's more of the shooter. So it's more, I think, for me, Noah picking the right shots, getting the right opportunities off ball through screens, or if he's going to handle, picking apart the defense and making the right shots. So we'll see what Noah does with his improvement.
Sorry, I'll just quickly mention this. You just mentioned all of his shots. He took 174 field goal attempts last year. 137 of them were 3. So like you just mentioned, if he develops as a scorer, it's going to be because he's attacking the rim more with that strength that he added. Because 100, I don't know what that percentage is of his field goal attempts, but it's high. So
yeah,
that's a high volume. And I think something else I wanted to kind of mention is, that playoff loss last year. We have to talk about it. Freddie, I don't know if you were watching that, or I'm sure you saw they crumbled under pressure. They lost to last seed Quinnipiac, and really it was a low point in the program. And you could kind of connect that to everyone leaving, but I think it's definitely a little more. There's more to it than that, just that loss. But how do you think that playoff loss is going to affect them going forward, Freddie? It was heartbreaking, but this is a brand new roster. It's still done though.
Yeah, but if you're done, you don't allow that to factor into your team's equation this year, because the majority of the team this year, they weren't there last year. There's no need to bring up something from the past, because I know if you brought up something to me and I had nothing to do with it, I'm just going to roll my eyes, because I'm thinking, well, coach, I'm not here because of what happened last year. If you brought me in for that, then you're really going to have a disconnect. It's got to be about what you're going to do this year, and it can't be about previous events or past happenstances that had nothing to do with the majority of different players and new players that are on the team right now. So if I'm John Dunn and the coaching staff, I'm not even bringing up what happened to Quinnipiac. I'm thinking about, look, what are we going to do this year to prove people wrong when it comes to the preseason prognostications? What are we going to do to make sure we're getting better as a basketball team, individually, collectively, minute by minute, second by second, in practice, in games, everywhere else? That has to be your main focus. It can't be about, okay, what's going on outside of here, or what happened before you guys got here. It's what are we going to do together? And they can hear whatever they have heard about Coach Dunn, but you're playing for him right now. So if he's giving you a chance to start over and you have a clean slate from him, then you got to give him the same kind of clean slate as well, so you can really make this work. It can't just be about, okay, what's he going to do for me? It's about what can you do together for each other, and not allow that if anybody brings up what happened in that loss to Quinnipiac in the MAC tournament, your response can be, that was then, this is now, or I wasn't there then. I don't care about that. I care about what we can do this year.
For sure. I think that's the most important thing they can do. Leave it in the past, move on. You got so much time to form a new culture, form a new team, let the scores shine, really just form something new. So yeah, that's a great summary. We're wrapping up at the end of this episode. We got 3 minutes till football, so I don't think we want to keep you guys, but I think something I want to go around the whole group with is, Thanksgiving's coming up, but there's Christmas displays up everywhere, and I think everyone's thinking about their wish list. I want everyone to go around. Give me one thing you wish for this MAC hoops this year, for Marist hoops. What's one thing you hope to see this year from Marist hoops? Jonathan, obviously, you're on the women's side, Christian on the men's side. You can talk about whatever you want, but one thing you want to see. Let's start with Andrew. Andrew, what's one thing you want to see from Marist hoops this year? For
me, it's plain and simple, and this goes for both sides. Just get a win in the MAC tournament. They both got shut out in the MAC tournament last year. They need a win to at least build confidence in the program in the following years, and that helps with recruiting as well. You don't want to look like, the worst team in the MAC, losing every single year in the MAC tournament, choking. So they need a win to build confidence, not just for their current iteration of the team, but for the program's future. Both sides.
For sure. Jonathan.
Yeah. Interesting question. I'll also say this for both teams, but keep in mind it's geared more toward the women. Shooting, right? We need to see some more shots go in. I mean, watching I obviously watched more of the women's team than the men last year. But for the women, it was just day after day, game after game, brick after brick, shot something like 24% from the three, and none of their players shot over 30%. So yeah, could we just make some shots, please? And, rebound to somewhere near average. And I think the women will be okay. And same goes for the men too. Cause in the game, this day and age, you gotta make threes. So it'll be interesting to see how it shapes up with them as well. But from what I hear of the women, they played 2 scrimmages and they've shot near 60% from 3 in both of them. And keep in mind, those are scrimmages, but hopefully, even if they shoot around 30%, that would be, they could shoot a little above 30%. That would be, probably enough. So hopefully we make some more shots.
That sounds like 30%. I think that's a need. Freddie, take it away.
Give the kids a reason to come out, because Dean Darling always said, if you win, they shall come out. That's what I want to see from Marist women's basketball and men's basketball. Give the students on campus a reason to support your team, because more than ever before, if you don't give them a reason to be entertained and give them a reason to support your team, they're just not going to show up. And the normals are going to show up because they're Marist season ticket holders and they've been part of the program for years and years and years and decades and decades and decades. But a college basketball program is always going to be at its best when you're winning and the kids are supporting you and the young people are supporting you. So that's the one thing as a Christmas wish for both of these teams. Give the young people, your peers, a reason to come out and support you, want to be there to support you and cheer and clap for you.
For sure. Christian.
I'm going to give 2 separate ones, one for the women, one for the men's. I think for the women, Coach Georges, I would love to see him get a signature win this year. Everybody knows what he's done for the women's program, and it'd be really nice, whether it's the Nova game or any other game in MAC play. I'd love to see him get maybe even some wins on the other side of the continent or in Dublin as well. That'd be pretty interesting. And then for the men, it's to be able to hold leads down the stretch. Last season, I think one of the issues for them was their inability to close games out. That's something I want to see from them. Also, quickly touch on, I'd love to see them play with pace as well. They have a lot of young guys, a lot of people looking to prove themselves. offensively, I'd love to see them get in transition, do all those different things. So pace and the ability to hold the games down would be my wish list for the men.
Yeah, that certainly, as someone that covered some of the one of the men's games against St. Peter's that they had a lead in and then just crumbled in the fourth quarter. I think that's something that they need to work on. I'll give you my list real quick. I think for the men's team, beat Rick Pitino at home. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I'd love that. I would love that. Trust me. I think we'd all love to see that. But I think more specifically for the men's team vibes, I think the team itself, I want to see some breakout players. I don't want to see one. I want to see multiple. I want to see them having fun because after last year, man, they just need to have some fun. And we've talked about culture, reiterated time and time again, but let's just see them have some fun. They're not in a position to win, but hey, maybe like win the whole thing. But hey, with string a few wins together, string a few games together, and this team could be having fun. And maybe, obviously with the transfer portal, like Freddie said, don't stop these guys from accelerating their basketball career and going on to, try to play in the NBA and like at these higher D1 schools, but just have some fun and form a culture that Marist players and fans are going to want to, pay attention to. And that's at the top of my list. And then with the women's team, just, a great send-off for Georges, just, kind of a victory lap. He's done so much for this program. I don't think he owes this program anything. Just a victory lap and end your tenure at Marist on a good note. Just have a fun season. I'm just looking out, just, form a good finale. That's what I got. So, but I think we're around the end of this lengthy but awesome episode of the Relay Throw. Christian, Jonathan, you guys, I will be seeing you on this pod. It's a requirement for you guys to come back if you want those priority points next semester.
It's on the contract.
It's in the contract, yeah. Freddie, thank you so much for joining us. You've been a blast. I think you love talking Marist athletics in general, and you're an essential part to Marist athletics. So we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I had a blast. I knew this was going to be a fun time and really, really appreciate and honored you guys asked me to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
For sure.
Thank
Andrew, I know you got some final words.
Do I? I don't think I do.
Oh, you
it's
don't?
NFL Sunday. Let's do this.
Yeah. Pats versus Colts, I think the Pats an easy win for the Pats, hopefully.
The real question is, how are you going to adjourn this podcast, Dan?
Oh, that's a great question.
For the listeners out there, when we have our center field, either general or editors meeting, the responsibility usually falls on Dan to say
the word, but I got to say something real quick.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
We got some. So anyway, games coming up. Marist plays Villanova Monday. And then the first men's game is Wednesday, I think.
Yes.
Is that a home game?
Yes.
Versus American. That'll be on ESPN Plus. Make sure to check that out. Follow these teams. Follow these beat writers, Christian and Jonathan. Make sure to tune in every night to ESPN Radio to hear Freddie and Fitzsimmons. Make sure to watch the next episode of the Relay Throw. We're going to be recapping fall sports pretty soon. And I'm sure, we got a lot to talk about with other sports.
Real quick, something to plug. I do have something to say. This Saturday, November 12th, Senior Day for Marist football. I will be covering that. Be sure to check them out. Give them some support.
Absolutely.
And I am the only beat writer left in fall sports because Marist volleyball is going to Orlando to the playoffs. They are
because they play them in Orlando for some reason.
Lake Buena Vista is just the place for Mac volleyball. Hey, maybe I'll join. Maybe I'll join them. Maybe I'll to cover them and also maybe take my own trip to Disney World. But anyways, we got a lot of stuff coming up. Make sure you follow Center Field on all of our socials and the Relay Throw on YouTube. I think the only way to say this is meeting adjourned. See you guys.